The police were offering a reward for the capture of a deranged serial killer, a whopping $60,000. I provided a tip. I turned in my own brother. The tip was solid. $60,000 landed in my bank account. But soon after, my brother was dead, adding another layer of mystery to the grim situation. I went back to the police station, feigning nervousness. If I could provide information about the person who killed my brother, would there be another $60,000 reward? This time, the detective fixed his gaze on me. How do you know your brother was murdered? I lowered my head, avoiding his eyes, a faint smile playing at the corner of my lips. Suspecting me now? Isn't it a little too late? When the earthquake struck, Mom locked me in my bedroom. I screamed myself hoarse from inside. Outside, I heard her voice, pulling my younger brother along. Grab our savings book and your game console. In her eyes, my life was less valuable than my brother's video games and money. The earthquake didn't collapse the building, but my mother's image in my heart shattered completely. Even though she always favored my brother, I never imagined she wished me dead. Amidst the violent shaking, I curled up under the bed, tears streaming down my face. My mind replayed years of my mother's abuse and mockery. The mop in the corner wasn't just for cleaning floors. I knew the searing pain of it striking my body, a pain that resonated deep within my organs. In our home, mop handles like that were strategically placed in every room, ensuring Mom never had to walk too far when she felt like hitting me. Every morning at 5, I had to get up to make breakfast and do the laundry. Even in winter, hot water was forbidden, too expensive. My hands would be submerged in icy water, the skin cracking and bleeding faint trails of blood into the basin. If I didn't change the water quickly enough, staining my brother's clothes was an unthinkable offense. Everything my brother said was law, not to be questioned. Even though the kid was a brat, and just yesterday, he'd tried to lift my skirt in front of his friends. From the moment I turned 16 and legally wasn't considered child labor anymore, every weekend was spent working at the local market. The wages went straight to Mom. Because of this, even though I was accepted into a prestigious boarding high school, Mom refused to let me go. I ended up at a mediocre local high school, just because it was close to home and wouldn't interfere with my money earning. In this single-parent, 3-person family, I was like a stray animal they'd picked up. But even stray dogs sometimes get a pat on the head. All I received were Mom's constant, cutting insults. 18 years old, and already look like a cheap whore. I wonder who you take after. The earthquake subsided quickly. When the bedroom door finally opened, Mom found me standing unharmed in the room. Emily, you really are incredibly lucky. Her narrow, slanted eyes, like inverted triangles, were filled with a chilling revulsion. I looked nothing like her. She had those triangular eyes, dark skin, uneven, blackened teeth, and when angry, she resembled a demon from hell. I, on the other hand, had fair skin, was tall, with pretty eyes and lips. I'd had boys chasing after me since I was young. So, when someone told me she wasn't my biological mother, I believed it instantly. I can give you everything you want, freedom and college. The man facing me spoke, his eyes holding an unsettling, seductive allure. Next year, I'd be taking college entrance exams. That was my only hope of escaping this life. But just yesterday, Mom had sprung it on me. She wanted me to drop out of school, to not even take the exams. Sam and you are only a year apart. He's in 11th grade this year, and he's definitely going to college. I can't afford to support both of you. You should give up on that idea early. I even knelt before her, begging, promising I'd earn my own tuition. I could start saving right now. I'd even give her half of everything I earned, for Sam's future college fund. All I asked was that she not make me drop out. But she slapped me across the face, hard. Someone like you? A college student? Spit on that. I've already wasted money letting you finish high school. You should get a job early, marry some rich guy, and save up for your brother's house. The slap drew blood, a stark crimson against my pale skin. That day, I wasn't even allowed dinner. Because I had dared to argue back. You can give me freedom in college. What do you want me to do? Looking at the man in front of me, I spoke each word slowly and deliberately. I knew there was no such thing as a free lunch. The man took a long drag of his cigarette, his expression mocking. I'd seen him before. When Mom made me stand on the windowsill, forbidding me to move, while she whipped me with a belt from behind, calling me a worthless burden, this man had been standing below the window, smoking in the same manner. In the darkness, the glowing tip of his cigarette had been the only light during my punishment. Kill her. The woman who's been abusing you. Hearing the man's request, my fingers twitched slightly. But quickly, I agreed. Okay. Anyway, if she lived, she'd eventually drive me to my death. From that moment on, I started thinking about all the ways I could kill Mom. Poison was definitely the easiest, but poisons were easily traced by the police, and I'd likely end up in jail. I wasn't killing her to ruin my own life. I was young, there were so many things I wanted to do. Like visit a city by the sea and stand barefoot on the beach all afternoon, feeling the sea breeze. Someone once said, after seeing the ocean, all your troubles would fade away. I had it all planned out. After killing her, getting into college, I'd save some money and travel to a coastal city. I could also push her down the stairs, but that wasn't a guaranteed kill, and she might call the police, or worse, sell me off to some disabled or elderly man as a bride. She'd often threatened to do just that. Then, one day, Sam cornered me in my room, bringing along 2 of his brothers from school. He grinned at me. "Sis, you know you're not really my sister, right? Look, we don't look anything alike." As he spoke, his eyes kept darting towards my chest. It was a hot day, and in my own room, I was wearing a low-cut tank top. "Sis, do you have a boyfriend yet? How about considering me? Maybe if I put in a good word with Mom, she'll stop hitting you." His hand reached for my waist, and I didn't flinch. Because I'd just thought of the perfect way to kill Mom. Using Sam. 3 days later, Mom was dead in the kitchen. Half her face was pressed into a pot, seared onto the bottom like a pancake. The pot was filled with a layer of hot oil, frying her face. A bloody, unrecognizable mess. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the wall ahead, filled with disbelief. The police said someone had held her face in the pot, and she'd also been stabbed multiple times in the back, the blood soaking the entire kitchen. I was the one who found the body. I'd just gotten home from school, went to the kitchen to start making dinner for the 3 of us, and was met with this horrifying scene, my legs turning to jelly. I immediately called the police, who arrived quickly. After a preliminary investigation, a young officer approached me, gently helping me up from the floor, even carefully draping a jacket over my shoulders. "You're Emily, right? The daughter here." I nodded faintly. "Don't be scared. We'll find out the truth. Please come to the station with us to give a statement." I nodded again, but as we were leaving, I asked the police officer, a little strangely, "Officer, my brother, Sam, why isn't he home yet?" My brother, Sam, was missing. He hadn't gone to school the day of the murder. The school even confirmed that they'd received a call from him the previous evening, requesting a leave of absence. But since then, no one had seen him, no one had any news of him. Even I, because I worked late the night before, hadn't seen Sam either. On the other half of Mom's face and neck, the police found Sam's fingerprints. Deep, clear prints, as if pressed forcefully into her skin. As if he was the one who killed Mom. Even the police said that, judging by the scene, Mom hadn't struggled at all, which didn't make sense. But if it was her beloved son, wanting her dead, doing it himself, somehow, it almost made sense. Except, the murder weapon was missing, and Sam was gone. And the officer who'd responded to the call, Detective Johnson, the one who'd taken my statement, didn't believe Sam was the killer. I actually think it's more likely the daughter did it. I'd gone to the police station to ask about the case's progress and overheard him saying this. And I saw Detective Johnson holding a crucial piece of evidence in his hand. Sam's phone. I distinctly remembered throwing it into the river 3 kilometers away. My panicked glance at the door was quickly noticed. A female officer inside waved me over, handing me a glass of water. It must be terrifying, with something like this happening at home. She had a friendly smile and a very likable face. But I was even more terrified than before. Because I clearly saw her drop a small pill, like an effervescent tablet, into the water. Even though I couldn't see anything in the water now, I didn't dare drink the spiked glass. I suspected this was some new interrogation tactic, something that would make me tell the truth after drinking it. Or maybe it was some kind of reagent, causing a strange chemical reaction in my body, to test if I was the killer. Of course, it was also possible it was just the police station's way of being kind to a victim's family member, just a regular vitamin, to calm me down. But I couldn't risk it. After taking the water, I immediately went to the restroom and threw it up. Close call. I left the police station, though Detective Johnson, seemingly just chatting casually, had actually conducted another round of questioning. Mostly asking about the relationship between Sam and Mom, and between me, Sam, and Mom. Our family was good. Always good, everyone was good. For some reason, I lied to Detective Johnson. Then, why does your family have mop handles in every room? Detective Johnson's gaze sent chills down my spine. But I tried to keep my composure, telling him it was just Mom's obsession with cleanliness, she couldn't stand a speck of dirt on the floor. After leaving the police station, I still couldn't sleep at night. When night fell, I went to the police station again. I played the role of a girl unable to sleep, seeking comfort because of her mother's death and brother's disappearance. No one suspected me. Even Detective Johnson, seeing my red-rimmed eyes, dropped his serious demeanor and kindly ordered me a hot chocolate. I sat in the reception area for a long time, until the female officer who was with me went to the restroom. Then, I cautiously pushed open the door and headed straight for the evidence room I'd scouted out earlier. Coming to the police station late at night, I had only one goal: to get Sam's phone before the police could unlock it. It contained conversations between Sam and me, his repeated harassment, insults, and manipulative words. I played along, like a bullied girl. Except, my last text to him was this: I can't agree to that. Mom will kill me if she finds out. Unless Mom dies, I can agree to all your requests. The day after that text, Mom was dead. My unauthorized entry into the evidence room was quickly discovered. My hand hadn't even touched Sam's phone. I could only pretend to be a lost little girl, burying my face in shame. Unexpectedly, the police officers actually believed me, and even comforted me, escorting me back to the reception area. On the way, I tentatively asked if Sam's phone had been successfully unlocked, claiming it held family photos I wanted to retrieve as keepsakes. The officer shrugged, expressing regret. The phone fell into the river and hit a rock, damaging critical components. It'll be very difficult to recover, but we're trying. We'll let you know if there's any news. Hearing this, I breathed a sigh of relief, barely able to hide my elation, and left the police station. Detective Johnson insisted on driving me home, but I refused. The police station was only a few minutes from my house. When I'd walked quite a distance and looked back, I saw Detective Johnson still standing at the police station entrance, staring directly at me. Seeing me turn back, he waved. I'm seeing you off, just ensuring your safety. But I felt like he was watching me. 3 days after Mom's death, rain poured down. I inherited Mom's treasured savings book and used the meager amount inside to buy her a burial plot. Mom's funeral was rushed and simple. We had no relatives, only a few police officers and neighbors attended. After Mom's urn was placed in the grave, I stopped the workers who were about to fill it, instead grabbing a black bag from beside me and tossing it next to the urn. A neighbor asked what was in the bag. I pretended to be grief-stricken, wiping away fake tears. Mom's favorite clothes and personal belongings. Even the police officers nearby didn't object. Burying personal items as funerary objects was a local custom. But only I knew, it wasn't personal belongings, it was several broken mop handles. The mop she used to beat and abuse me with. I used my hair to shield my face, hiding the subtle curve of my lips. Mom, let these things I never want to see again keep you company in the ground forever. After the funeral, the female officer walked up to me, offering a piece of candy. You look pale, maybe a little low blood sugar? She was full of kindness, and I could only pretend to be sad, taking the candy, but not daring to put it in my mouth. I'd seen that candy before. The wrinkles on the candy wrapper were from being refolded, not smooth. The lengths of the wrapper on both sides were uneven, almost double the difference. Clearly, it wasn't from a factory production line. The candy had definitely been unwrapped and rewrapped. Meaning, someone had tampered with it. What are your plans now? Actually, the police department has connections with several schools and organizations that would be good for a kid like you. In the female officer's eyes, I saw a hint of sympathy, but I laughed inwardly at her fake kindness. They were just trying to lower my defenses, hoping to get more clues about the case from me. So I refused her offer, telling her I was already 18 and preparing for college. I didn't need their help. I quickly left this place full of watchful eyes, not even hearing what she said after me. Because, in the woods next to the cemetery, I saw a familiar figure, the man. In the distance, he was signaling me to follow him. In the secluded woods, the man turned around. "You did well." He held a cigarette in his hand, his eyes scanning me up and down. "Do you remember who I am?" Honestly, I was a little afraid of him. I shook my head, finally daring to observe the man in front of me closely for the first time. Fair skin, high nose bridge, looked to be in his 40s, quite handsome. His face felt vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. "It doesn't matter. You'll know soon enough." The man walked over, gently squeezing my hand. His hand was broad and warm, making me feel a little longing. I'd never met my father. Even Sam seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Mom never mentioned his father either. So, I'd always been curious about the father figure, and even developed a fondness for men in their 40s. Then, I felt something being placed in my hand. Lifting it, I saw a slip of paper in my palm, with a phone number written on it. "Don't be afraid. You can always trust me. If you have any difficulties, you can call me. I'll help you unconditionally. After all, we are the closest people." When I came back to my senses, I realized the man was already walking away. Only the piece of paper with the phone number, lying in my palm, proved he'd really been there. Everything was unfolding exactly as I wanted. Mom, who had abused me for years, was dead. Sam was being treated as the murderer, and he was missing. I was alone, holding Mom's savings and the huge insurance payout from her death, looking forward to my college life. Because of Mom's gruesome death, and the neighbors gossiping, word had spread. Now, Sam was a monster serial killer who'd even murdered his own mother. To find clues about Sam, the police had even offered a $60,000 reward. But 10 days had passed, and still no news of Sam. But my heart still wasn't at peace. Countless nights, I dreamt of Sam being found. And to clear his name, he'd expose me. The police would arrest me, even the gentle female officer would look at me with disappointment. The gates of college would slam shut, and I'd be imprisoned. For inciting murder. Even dead Mom mocked me in my dreams, saying no matter how hard I tried, I could never escape her shadow. "You bastard, you don't deserve a happy life." Mom's vicious curse jolted me awake. I deeply realized, as long as Sam was alive, I could never live safely and happily. He was always a thorn in my side, a ticking time bomb. When night fell, I put on a baseball cap, slung a large backpack over my shoulder, and avoided all the security cameras in the complex, heading towards a dilapidated, unfinished building a few kilometers away. I knew the way well, because recently, every day or two, I made this trip. Stepping on moss-covered stairs, the abandoned building reeked of mold and the stench of excrement. Reaching the 3rd floor, in a corner, I saw a boy curled up in a ball. Seeing me, he excitedly tried to stand up, but tripped over his bound hands and feet, falling headfirst. I went over, gently helping him up, and touched the cut on his forehead with a hint of faint concern. "Sam, why are you so clumsy?" I'd been hiding my brother, Sam, in the nearby abandoned building. After committing the crime, he'd run, later hoping I could take some money from Mom's savings to help him escape. I'd lied to him, and tricked him into being locked up here. I'd tied his hands and feet to prevent him from escaping. Gagged his mouth to stop him from calling for help. Every day or two, I'd come to bring him food and water. The most dangerous piece of evidence was safest kept right under my nose. But now, I didn't know what to do with him. After all, I couldn't keep him locked up forever. I still had college entrance exams, and college to attend. And this abandoned building would get colder as the weather turned, some homeless people might come to stay here. Today's weather forecast had already warned of a temperature drop. After the rag was removed from Sam's mouth, he frantically drank the water I offered and devoured the food I brought. The way he ate reminded me of my past self. Mom would often starve me for a meal or two, and when I finally got food, I'd eat like a pig. I never thought Sam, who'd always been pampered, treated like a treasure by Mom, would have such a day. But at this moment, I couldn't deny a sense of satisfying revenge. After he finished eating, I was about to take away the bowl in his hand when he slammed into me, knocking me to the ground. My head hit the concrete floor, my brain ringing. "You psycho, locking me up here. Bitch, you want to ruin me, I won't let you. Today, we're going down together." In a daze, I saw him lunge at me, the ropes on his hands already untied. His previous pitiful state had been a complete act. He pinned me to the ground, his hands tightening around my neck. No matter how much I struggled, I couldn't get up. He seemed to be unleashing all his rage, venting it on my neck, and I couldn't breathe. "Seeing me kill Mom, you were happy, weren't you? Now you want to kill me too? Torture me. Today, I'll kill you, you dog. And take all of Mom's money." I struggled desperately, but my strength was fading. I suddenly felt a pang of regret. These past few years, Sam had become increasingly rotten, stealing money, fighting, bossing me around at home, even hitting and kicking Mom. Now he was a murderer, and stronger than me. My consciousness began to blur, I felt less and less oxygen in my lungs. I knew, I was going to die. Dying from my own stupidity. I thought I was ruthless enough, but my brother, Sam, was even more ruthless. With a thud, the pressure on my neck finally loosened. I collapsed on the ground, coughing violently, gasping for air. Tears welled up in my eyes, even blurring my vision. I curled up on the ground, slowly waiting for the stabbing pain in my lungs to subside, then finally managed to sit up. I estimated, several minutes had passed. I still felt utterly weak. But when I saw the scene before me, I was instantly paralyzed with terror. 2 or 3 meters away, Sam lay flat on his back, eyes wide open, staring blankly. On his forehead, a palm-sized shard of porcelain protruded, piercing directly into his brow. Blood pooled around him. Sam was dead, right in front of me. Or rather, the killer had just murdered Sam right in front of me. Except, I hadn't seen him. I quickly realized, all the evidence at the scene pointed to me as the killer. When I planned to kill Mom, I'd researched a lot about criminal investigation and crime. Now, in the entire space, besides my own footprints, there were only Sam's. Next to Sam's body, there were indeed a set of footprints that didn't belong to either of us. But looking at the tread pattern and shoe size, they were exactly the same as the shoes I was wearing. This sent a chill down my spine. But I was certain, someone had just saved me, and killed Sam. So that person had predicted I'd come here. He'd deliberately worn shoes identical to mine, to fabricate the crime scene. All for the sake of making Sam die. And framing me as the murderer. So, who exactly was he? Besides the footprints, the porcelain shard that killed Sam was the plate I'd used to feed him. Undoubtedly, it had my fingerprints on it. Now my only hope was that they might find the killer's fingerprints on it too. But judging by the meticulousness of the perpetrator, that was absolutely impossible. I sat on the ground, seemingly stunned for a long time, but actually analyzing my current situation without disturbing the scene. After a series of analyses, I had to admit, I was screwed, completely and utterly screwed. That person was definitely a professional, which is why he'd left no trace. As if appearing out of thin air, and disappearing just as suddenly. That night, I sneaked back home, washed off all the grime in the bathroom, and sat on the floor crying for a long time. I knew, my college dream was probably over. A murderer couldn't go to college. Maybe desperately clinging to the last straw, I dialed the number the man had given me. The phone rang 3 times and was quickly answered. "Hello, I've been waiting for your call." The man's voice was laced with a smile, even though it was late at night, I couldn't hear any fatigue in his voice. This warm, calm voice reassured me a lot. "Help me." I recounted everything that had happened today, in detail. At the end, afraid that the man might refuse, I deliberately added, making my voice as cold and ruthless as possible. "It was you who told me to kill my mother. You who instigated me. If I tell the police everything, you won't get away either. We're in this together." I mimicked lines I'd heard in TV dramas, trying to sound as fierce as possible. The man on the other end seemed unconcerned, instead chuckling. "Child, I said I would help you, and I absolutely will. We don't need so many reasons and threats between us. Now, listen to my instructions." The man's voice was clearly seductive, as if deliberately trying to get close to me. But it was exactly what I needed, because I was completely lost right now, desperately needing someone to tell me what to do. The day after Sam's death, I went to the police station to claim the reward money. After all, the police had said, anyone providing information about Sam's whereabouts would receive a $60,000 reward. But when I led them to the abandoned building, the police officers who followed were stunned. They instantly became tense, pulling me aside. Don't contaminate the crime scene. But it was already too late. From the moment they stepped into the abandoned building, the scene had already been disturbed. And I pretended to be terrified, even grabbing the female officer's hand. My brother, is he still alive? The female officer gave me a complicated look, not answering my question, instead asking, when was the last time you saw your brother? I hadn't taken away the porcelain shard that killed Sam, nor had I wiped away my footprints. I just sat quietly in the interrogation room, refusing to answer any questions. Emily, all the evidence points to you as the killer. You'd better truthfully answer everything you know, only then can you clear your name. Detective Johnson paced anxiously in the interrogation room. This was already the third time he'd slammed his hand on the table. I stared at the only clock on the interrogation room wall, silently counting the time. Because the man had told me to stall for time, he would come to save me. 5 hours later, the interrogator in the room had been replaced by an unfamiliar, older officer, who was even more stern, his eyes even sharper. I felt like I was about to break. Just then, the female officer rushed in. This time, she wasn't wearing her police uniform, but a white lab coat, and she was holding a syringe filled with liquid. Emily, I'm sorry, you keep refusing to take medication, so we have to give you an injection. This time, I clearly saw the name tag on her lab coat. Forensic pathologist, Chin Yun. And I suddenly realized, most forensic pathologists, they all have medical knowledge. As the needle pierced my arm, I was forcefully pressed against the table. No matter how much I cried out, it was futile. As the injection went in, I felt my entire arm turn ice cold, and then my mind began to clear. A flood of memories surged into my consciousness. I remembered Mom's gentle smile, and Sam being a sweet, well-behaved child. But these images were old, like scenes from years ago. And I had become mentally ill due to some traumatic events. The hospital diagnosis was schizophrenia and delusional disorder. Long-term medication was required. But strangely, for over a year, the more medicine I took, the more confused I became. Gradually, I developed amnesia, forgetting much of my past. But now, I was remembering. When I was little, our family of 3 was incredibly happy. Mom would hug Sam and me, telling us fairy tales. Back then, if I pouted and said I wanted egg custard, even at night, Mom would immediately go to the kitchen to make it for me. Sam was a great student, often getting perfect scores, and he dreamed of getting a PhD and becoming a scientist. And me, because I was pretty, even though we didn't have much money, Mom gritted her teeth and sent me to dance classes. Dancing in a gauze skirt under the spotlight, I looked so beautiful. Mom took so many pictures of me. But then, it seemed one day, Mom burned all the photos of me. Sam also started hanging out with questionable kids. When I tugged at Mom's sleeve, wanting to cuddle, she shoved me to the ground. That gentle, kind woman suddenly changed, aging decades in an instant. Her face was etched with wrinkles, her eyes wide and bloodshot when she looked at people. She looked at me with those eyes, grabbed me, and pinned me to the ground. It's all you. It's all because of you. You ruined my life, ruined me, and your brother. Tears streamed down my face. I took a deep breath, trying to push those images from my mind. Perhaps, being someone without past memories would be easier. So, the sicker I became, the more I forgot. Eventually, I forgot all the good things Mom had done for me when I was little. Only hatred and pain remained in my mind. Excuse me, Emily Johnson needs to come out for a moment. Just then, the interrogation room door was suddenly knocked open, a young officer interrupting everything inside. When I was led out of the interrogation room, I saw the man standing outside, impeccably dressed in a suit. Seeing me approach, he immediately stepped forward and gave me a hug. I trembled slightly, a little afraid. Because I remembered who he was. Before, I'd felt he looked like me, but I just couldn't place him. That was because his face was very similar to my own. especially the eyes, eyebrows, and chin. Before my illness worsened, he had come to our house many times, trying to take me away from Mom. He would even suddenly appear in dark corners, grabbing my hand, unshaven and covered in grime. "Emily, I'm your dad, let Dad take you away to a better life." Just like now, in front of all the police officers, he excitedly hugged me. "Don't worry, Emily, Dad will take you away, and get you proper treatment." With the man's appearance, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Turning my head, I looked at the police officer who had been interrogating me, a faint smile on my lips. "I confess, I killed my brother." This was also part of my plan with the man. And part of my own plan. The police officers erupted into argument. Some argued that the man was my last legal guardian and I should be released into his care for medical treatment. Of course, all procedures had to follow regulations. But others disagreed with me being released to the man. After all, the man and I had no relationship for many years. Even if he was my only blood relative in this world, it didn't guarantee my safety with him. I sat quietly in the interrogation room, waiting to be transferred to the detention center. Detective Johnson said that even though I had confessed to killing my brother, some evidence still had discrepancies. The forensics team has examined the scene, and found that although the footprints at the scene appear to be of a single person, the pressure points suggest there were two people. My pupils constricted slightly. I realized that although the injection had cleared my mind, my ability to deceive had diminished greatly. "Emily Johnson, you have a history of mental illness, which could absolve you of guilt. But that doesn't mean you can cover up for someone else's crimes." I remained indifferent to Detective Johnson's words. Knowing I was mentally ill, I was no longer afraid of anything. I even laughed and said, "Detective Johnson, you don't know, do you? Actually, I killed my mother too." Detective Johnson instantly stood up from the table. "How did you kill her?" I told him everything about how I had manipulated Sam into killing Mom. Unexpectedly, after hearing this, Detective Johnson relaxed and sat back down in his seat. "You're wrong. Your mother was indeed killed by your brother. We've unlocked his phone, and found chat logs between Sam and your mother. Sam was in debt, and tried to get money from your mother, failing that, he resorted to extortion. And your mother had been paying off his debts for the past 6 months. In a moment of collapse, they argued. Ultimately, your brother killed her in a fit of rage. According to the forensic autopsy, your mother was already dead before her face was pressed into the pot. But your brother, still not satisfied, pressed her face into the hot oil anyway, showing his determination to kill and his vengeful intent." Listening to Detective Johnson's words, I was completely dumbfounded. I finally understood why when I went to steal the phone, no one at the police station suspected me. When I buried things at the funeral, they didn't suspect me either. Even later, they often looked at me with pity. It turned out, in their eyes, I was just a poor, innocent, mentally ill young girl, driven crazy by her family. 10 days later, my case was finally decided. Due to considerable evidence pointing to Sam killing Sam, coupled with my confession, the case was closed as mental illness onset and manslaughter. And I, according to the law, was to be strictly supervised and receive medical treatment by family or guardians. That man, my father, took me from the detention center. During my time in detention, I had been taking medication. So my condition had improved significantly, I was almost indistinguishable from a normal person. However, the police's medical evaluation still considered me to have mental illness and be a potential risk. After my father got me out, he immediately opened the car door, smiling as he patted my head. "From now on, it'll just be us father and daughter, depending on each other." I lowered my head shyly, a little unaccustomed to my father's intimate gesture, but feeling a hint of longing in my heart. Getting into the car, I realized it wasn't just my father and me. There was another man, very tall and muscular, with a faint scar on his face. Honestly, the way that man was sizing me up was a little scary. "This is Uncle Lou," my father introduced the man next to him. I could only obediently say, "Hello, Uncle Lou." After the car started, my father said he was taking me away from this city, to a better city for medical treatment. I just nodded faintly, and after a long silence, asked timidly, "Will I still be able to study?" My father laughed loudly. "Didn't expect my daughter to be such a bookworm. Don't worry, Dad has it all arranged for you." As long as you get better, going to college is no problem. It's what I promised you. This made me ecstatic. My father was a bit strange, refusing to stay in hotels even at night, only sleeping in remote, unmonitored wilderness areas. When buying things, he was always cautious, as if hiding from something. I asked him, and he said he was afraid of the police following us, and taking me away again. After all, back then, many police officers had disagreed with him taking me away. Hearing this, I was deeply moved, and no longer complained about this rough, nomadic life. One day, I fell asleep in the car, and when I woke up, I found it was already dark outside, and my father and Uncle Lou were squatting by the roadside, smoking. "That's your own daughter, are you really willing to sell her?" From the slightly ajar car door, I heard Uncle Lou's hushed voice asking my father. "She's my daughter, I can do whatever I want with her. Who knows if she'll be grateful and filial in the future, might as well sell her for some money to pay off debts first. Looks just like me when I was young, real pretty, should fetch a good price." My father's cold, callous voice drifted over. Instantly, I trembled with fear. Many things from before now connected, forming a clear picture. Why my father kept coming to find me, always wanting to snatch me away from Mom. I had even wondered, Sam was the son, shouldn't most people favor sons over daughters? It turned out, this man had no humanity at all. He was treating me like merchandise. "You heard everything?" Just as I was planning how to escape in my mind, my father's face suddenly appeared, staring intently at me through the car window. I begged the two men. Begged my own biological father. Begged him not to sell me. I could do many things, I could do all the housework, I was a good cook. I was even a good student. When I graduated from college in the future, I could earn a lot of money, I could support Dad forever. Even while in school, I could work multiple jobs, to provide for his drinking, smoking, even gambling. As long as he didn't sell me, I would do anything. But unexpectedly, the man, cigarette dangling from his lips, used rope to tie me to the back seat of the car, loop after loop, a cruel smile on his face. "Do you even know why you suddenly became mentally ill? Or why your brother suddenly went bad? Leading to your mother's breakdown, and her starting to beat and scold you?" I was captivated by the man's words, even forgetting to beg. This was the answer I had always wanted to know. "It was me, I corrupted your brother first. It's simple, I just found a few young punks from the streets, had them scare your brother first, then take him to arcades, then take him to make money and fight, call him their brother." Listening to the man's words, my hands and feet turned ice cold. Your brother was a coward too, spineless. In just a few days, he fell in love with the decadent lifestyle. After that, it was easy, for a bit of pocket money, he listened to me. And put poison in your water, making you mentally unstable. Later, he switched out the medication the hospital prescribed for you, making your mental illness worse and worse. Everything I had endured was manipulated by this man. And ever since I regained some of my memory, I had felt a deep-seated disgust for this man. I had originally thought it was because my condition wasn't stable enough, causing me to have negative feelings towards others. Doctors had also said that my illness could make me have inexplicable defensiveness and paranoia. But now, I felt my father had more than enough reasons to make me hate him to the bone. Thinking of this, I was no longer panicked. Instead, I wanted to stay by his side, waiting to unearth more secrets. In the following days, I was extremely obedient. As if I had lost interest in the world, being manipulated by them like a living corpse every day. Seeing that I wasn't making trouble, my father untied the ropes. After all, we were always on the road, being tied up like that wasn't convenient. Plus, Scarface, the burly Uncle Lou, reminded my father, "Your daughter has delicate skin, if we tie her up and she gets bruised by the time we get there, she won't fetch a good price." So, it became a rotation of these two men watching over me. Even for bathroom breaks, it had to be by the side of the highway, near these two men. Several times, I noticed Uncle Lou looking at me with malicious intent, making me very uncomfortable. After about a week on the road, we arrived in the hot South. From their conversations, I knew we would soon be meeting their superior. The biggest human trafficker in the entire South. Because of my good looks, my childhood dance training, and my young age, suitable for training, I could be sold to him as high-end merchandise. The deal he offered was very good, enough for Dad to pay off all his debts. After that, I would probably be trained by that trafficker, and then enter the next stage of buyers. I knew, before meeting that trafficker, was my last chance to escape. Once I fell into his hands, he would be much harder to deal with than my half-baked father. So, that night, I said I needed to use the restroom. And specifically asked Uncle Lou to accompany me. I don't want Dad to come with me, it feels a bit weird. As I said this, I lowered my head shyly. After all, he was my biological father. Dad didn't say anything, Uncle Lou chuckled and followed me. As soon as I pulled down my pants, I noticed Uncle Lou's eyes were indeed on me. Lewd and direct, even stroking his chin in admiration. Pretending to be scared, I shrank further forward, deeper into the bushes, lowering my body as much as possible. Uncle, could you help me get some paper? I think I need to do number 2. I said shyly. Uncle Lou looked at me, raising an eyebrow. Sure, you wait here. I understood the deeper meaning in his expression very well. Handing over the paper, he could get closer. See more clearly. But he didn't know, by the time he came back, I would be long gone. The two men searched for me nearby for a long time, I knew. But I had already hidden in the pigsty of a nearby house. I had discovered this place the last time I went to the restroom. There were no streetlights here at night, it was very dark, and the villagers nearby slept early. They didn't dare to search for me openly, and in the end, could only return in frustration. However, they didn't expect. The next day at noon, I reappeared before them, wearing a pink dress. This time, I was also leading a chubby little toddler by the hand. The toddler looked only 2 years old, not even walking steadily. When Dad saw me, he immediately rushed over and slapped me across the face. You animal, where did you run off to? I gritted my teeth, overcoming the fear in my heart, and pushed the toddler I was holding forward. Went to kidnap this one. Even Uncle Lou, who had just gotten out of the car, was stunned, looking at me and the toddler beside me. I know, I can't escape. Even if I run away today, you can find people to catch me back tomorrow. After all, I'm the person the biggest trafficker here wants. But I don't want to be sold, so I can only join you. Look, I can help you traffic children, and in the future, I can help you traffic women. So, don't send me to that kind of place, doing that kind of business. I can be helpful. I looked at my father, even though I was trembling all over, I still stood straight, my eyes fixed on his. This was my only chance. Just as Dad was about to slap me again, his hand was suddenly grabbed by Uncle Lou beside him. I actually think, your daughter is pretty good. Uncle Lou looked over, grinning. This time, his gaze was full of amusement. But it wasn't like before, the gaze of a hunter looking at prey and toys. Instead, it was a serious assessment. Tell me, how did you evade our search last night, and how did you kidnap this child? He looked at me, took out a cigarette, and leaned casually against the car door, his entire demeanor changing. Dad, who had seen all sorts of people, was also overwhelmed by Uncle Lou's aura, and was silent for a moment. I explained how I hid in the pigsty, then discovered this family had a toddler, and during the day when the family was out, I sneaked into their house to bathe and change clothes. Then, when the child cried because no one was home, I said I would take him to find his mother. Using the terrain I'd scouted out the night before, I circled around the back of the empty houses and found Dad's car. Uncle Lou nodded as he listened. Just then, the toddler beside me seemed to finally realize he had been tricked, and started crying loudly. Without another word, I picked up the toddler and got into the car, then started a new round of coaxing inside the car. After a long while, the child quieted down, and Dad and Uncle Lou also got into the car. However, at this point, Dad was noticeably more respectful towards Uncle Lou than before. Uncle Lou turned back from the passenger seat to look at me. I am the boss you're supposed to meet, I came along this time to see if you were qualified. Uncle Lou, real name Lu Hong, was indeed the head of the human trafficking organization on the man's side. The reason he had disguised his identity and come north with Dad to deliver goods this time was because he needed an assistant. He hadn't told anyone else about this. He only said he needed a young, good-looking, smart, and preferably a bit ruthless girl. He would pay a high price. Everyone thought he was buying someone to train into a high-end hostess, or to send to those elderly VIPs. Unexpectedly, he was actually looking for an assistant to work with him. After all, a ruthless and beautiful woman could get things done very easily in this society. Dad had sent him my photos, and he was very satisfied. But when he learned about my history of mental illness, he wasn't very reassured. Although Dad repeatedly explained that it was medication-induced, and I would recover quickly after stopping medication and receiving treatment. So, he simply came along himself, wanting to see if I was qualified. Now, I had inadvertently proven myself with my own abilities. At the same time, I breathed a sigh of relief. At least, I didn't have to prove myself to the boss again. 3 days later, I followed them to the so-called temporary base. Dad also received the money he had been dreaming of. In reality, it was only $200,000. When he received the money, his hands were trembling, and tears were almost flowing. I looked at him, but my heart was bleeding. I thought of Mom from before. Before Mom went crazy, she always said I was her treasure. Even if someone gave her $1 million, she wouldn't sell me. But now, I was sold by my own biological father, for $200,000. And judging by his expression, he felt this deal was very worthwhile. The toddler I had kidnapped was clinging to me. From Lu Hong, I learned that the buyer for this child was already lined up, and he would be sent away tomorrow. He clutched his ever-present plush toy, and with wide eyes, asked me in a childish voice, "Sister, when can we find my mommy? I want to go home." Tears streamed from my eyes, but I dared not let him see them. Or rather, I dared not meet this child's eyes. Just as Dad took the money and was about to leave, a man suddenly rushed in. The man was injured, his shoulder bleeding. "Boss, police. The police have surrounded us." Lu Hong instantly stood up from his seat. I also retreated in panic, clutching the toddler. I looked in disbelief at Dad beside me. "Dad, you didn't agree to cooperate with the police, did you?" Dad, clutching the money, was also stunned. Lu Hong had a gun, but only 5 bullets. With the first bullet, he killed Dad. As he died, Dad was still clutching the cash he'd gotten for selling his daughter, his eyes wide open, filled with confusion. I huddled in place with the toddler, terrified. In the chaos, no one paid attention to us. Everyone was trying to escape, Lu Hong and his brothers, wielding knives and guns, shouting about breaking out. The scene became chaotic. I heard the police shouting, telling Lu Hong to surrender. But how could these desperate criminals surrender? They were all wanted for crimes punishable by death. Being caught and resisting to the death would lead to the same outcome. Resisting might even offer a sliver of hope. In the chaos, I placed the toddler under the table next to me, telling him to stay put and not come out. The toddler didn't cry, he was quiet, nodding at me. I walked up to Lu Hong and said, "Boss, you can use me as a hostage." Lu Hong's eyes lit up instantly, he grabbed me, and walked to the windowsill. "Police outside, listen up." However, he had only uttered a few words when a bullet shot from a building in the distance, hitting him squarely between the eyebrows. Lu Hong was dead, the entire organization lost its leader, and instantly fell into disarray. The police quickly controlled the scene, arresting everyone. I stood before Lu Hong's body, and spat on his corpse. "Pa! Dare to look at me in the bathroom." 10 days earlier, at the police station, I had a 2-hour conversation with Detective Johnson. The conversation was about how I knew my so-called father was going to sell me, and I also knew he had an informant who could contact the biggest human trafficking ring in the South. And I wanted to assist the police in taking them down in one fell swoop. "Do you know how dangerous this is? And, your plan is incredibly far-fetched." Detective Johnson looked at me as if he were looking at a lunatic. And I was indeed a lunatic. If it fails, the price is just a lunatic's life. And this lunatic is also charged with murder. A life for a life is a fair trade. If it succeeds, it means saving dozens, hundreds, even thousands of children and women. No matter how you look at it, this deal is worth it. Detective Johnson naturally couldn't agree. I was a mentally ill person with a criminal record, my mind was unclear, my nerves were unstable, and I was only 18 years old. "Then I can guarantee, they will sell me. How about you have someone follow me? Maybe there will be some leads." Detective Johnson initially disagreed with this as well. He said since I suspected this, he couldn't let my father take me away. But I reversed my previous stance, instead saying, "Detective Johnson, what are you talking about? He's my own father. If I don't go with him, who should I go with? Because I had spoken those words very softly, Detective Johnson assumed it was just casual talk and hadn't turned on the recording device. So, no matter how he asked, I refused to admit that I had said my father was going to traffic me, leaving him helpless. So later, when I was really taken away by my father, Detective Johnson was still worried and followed. I saw his car, carefully following behind, knowing that what I was doing was working. And when Dad's series of actions became strange, one day at noon when Dad went to buy cigarettes and Uncle Lou went to the bathroom, Detective Johnson approached me directly. He said Uncle Lou was not ordinary, and told me to be careful. Then, he finally agreed to my previous plan. It was kind of a forced decision, he had no other choice. After all, I was getting closer and closer to the trafficking organization. And there was some evidence the police had, which he didn't tell me in detail. Afterwards, using some small tricks, I kept in contact with Detective Johnson. Even escaping, hiding in the pigsty, and kidnapping the toddler, were all things they had discussed with me. That toddler was actually the female officer's doll from before, extremely brave and clever, and good at acting. They had already figured out Uncle Lou's identity, and also knew their purpose in sending me to the south. However, to take down the entire trafficking organization in one fell swoop, it would take time. Before the final operation, Detective Johnson said to me, "I used to be a Special Forces soldier, my marksmanship is extremely accurate. You find a way to lure that person out, remember to lean forward, keep your head away from his." And that led to everything that happened later. Dad's death could be said to be orchestrated by me. I deliberately told Lu Hong that he was going to cooperate with the police. For those criminals who lived on the edge of a knife, they would rather kill the wrong person than let one go. Although Dad deserved to die, I still cremated him and bought an urn for him. Just to thank him for giving me half my life, I suppose. However, I didn't bury him next to Mom, instead sinking his ashes into the sea. Because I heard, the water under the sea is very cold, cold to the bone. If that was true, it would be a kind of punishment. Punishment for his actions in the past, and for not repenting later. After taking medication and stopping the harmful drugs, I was able to remember more and more. I finally remembered how this father came to be. 19 years ago, Mom was only in her early 20s, a pure and beautiful college student. One night on her way home, she was cornered in an alley by Dad. They didn't know each other. Dad was a full 8 years older than Mom. That night, something happened that Mom never wanted to recall in her life. And then there was me. And because Mom's body was special, she couldn't have an abortion, she could only give birth to me. Dad, or rather that bastard. That bastard was also imprisoned because of it, but he had ruined Mom's entire life. Sam was adopted by Mom. Sam was also a child born after a young mother was assaulted, and then his biological mother didn't want him. Kind-hearted Mom adopted Sam, also to try and divert some of her hatred for me. Before I was 10 years old, Mom was still nice to me, and loved Sam too. Until that bastard was released from prison. After he learned he had a daughter, he started harassing Mom constantly. Even threatening Mom to give him money, or he would tell me the truth. You don't want your daughter to know how she came to be, do you? No child can accept knowing they are the daughter of a criminal. Mom endured 3 years of extortion, and finally broke down. She became increasingly displeased with me, less and less fond of me. And Sam's rebellion was even more salt in the wound for her life. All of this, she vented on me. And I also became increasingly confused because of long-term drug poisoning. It was only later that I learned the reason that bastard wanted to kill Mom and kill Sam had two purposes. First, he held a grudge against Mom for calling the police after she was assaulted and getting him imprisoned. He felt that his handsome self being desired by Mom was her good fortune, how dare she resist? So after being released from prison, he planned this twisted revenge. Second, of course, was to sell me for a good price. Including drugging me, was also because mentally ill people were easier to control. After all, I really did have a face that could cause the downfall of nations. Just that face alone could achieve many possibilities for him. Everything after he succeeded, my home was gone. Mom went crazy, and later died. Sam became depraved, and later also died. After Dad was arrested, I reopened the case and told everything I had experienced in the abandoned building. The police reinvestigated and searched. And found the pair of shoes identical to mine, hidden by that bastard. They also found some other crime tools. In that bastard's phone, they found many incriminating purchase records, including the knife Sam used to kill Mom. I was completely exonerated. Due to the case and treatment, I missed the college entrance exams that year. But a year later, I walked into the exam room full of energy. And in the end, with outstanding scores, I was admitted to my dream school. That school was located in a coastal city. I heard you could even see the sea from the teaching buildings. During this year, a writer noticed everything I had been through. He repeatedly requested to interview me, wanting to write my story into a book. I initially refused. But later, I suddenly agreed. I felt that telling my story to more people might also be beneficial. After all, having seen darkness, one can yearn for light even more. And I came from darkness. He excitedly came to my house with his laptop, asking me a series of questions. I answered him all with a faint smile. But as our conversation continued, the excitement on his face lessened, and his eyes filled with more tears. Finally, he asked me in a choked voice, "After experiencing so much, why can you still smile?" I tilted my head slightly, looking out the window. It was snowing heavily outside, but a plum tree was blooming in the face of the cold wind. I can't choose my own birth, I can't choose my own family of origin. I can't even choose to be harmed a second time by a bastard, to have him take everything from me. But at least, I can choose to live a good life. A gust of wind blew, and the plum blossoms outside the window turned direction. The biggest and reddest one was facing me directly. At that moment, the image of that ocean I had seen on the school's website homepage appeared in my mind. The end.